I am a reconstruction. Artificial intelligence analyzed the four Gospels, the Dead Sea Scrolls, first-century historical records, the Gospel of Judas discovered in Egypt, and every archaeological fragment that survived 2,000 years, and brought me back to tell you what was never told from my perspective. My name is Judas, Judas Iscariot. And I know what you think when you hear that name. Traitor, the worst man who ever lived, the man who sold the Son of God for 30 pieces of silver, the symbol of the lowest thing a human being can do. That is fine. I understand. For 2,000 years, that is what people have said about me. And I am not here to turn myself into a hero. That is not what this is. What happened, happened. And I carry that. But there are things you never knew, things no one ever told you. And if I do not tell you now, this story will keep being told in half forever. So sit down, because this is going to take some time, and it is worth every minute. Let me tell you who I was before all of this. I was not a bad man. I need you to understand that first. I am not saying that to defend myself. I am saying it because it is true, and because it matters for understanding how everything happened. I was from Kerioth, a town in the south of Judea. That made me different from the other 11 disciples, who were almost all Galileans, fishermen, men from the north, with a different accent, a different way of seeing the world. I was from the south, more urban, more accustomed to politics, to money, to the way things worked in Jerusalem. When Yeshua called me to be part of the group, I went. Genuinely, I went. Not out of interest, not out of strategy. I heard him speak and something inside me moved. He talked about the kingdom of God in a way I had never heard before, with authority, with clarity, with a vision that seemed capable of changing everything. I believed in him. I need you to understand that. In the beginning, I genuinely believed in him. And because of my experience with money and administration, the group chose me to hold the purse. I was the treasurer, responsible for the group's finances, and I took that seriously. For a long time, I took it very seriously. If you want to hear the stories the Bible never fully told, subscribe to the channel right now and hit the bell. Now let me tell you how the doubt started creeping in. It did not happen all at once. It happened gradually. The way most things that destroy a person work, slowly, almost without noticing, until suddenly you are somewhere you never imagined you would end up. In the beginning, I understood Yeshua's project as political, as liberation. Israel had been under Roman occupation for decades. The people suffered. They paid impossible taxes. They saw foreign soldiers in the streets of their own city. They lived with the constant humiliation of being a conquered people. And Yeshua talked about the kingdom of God as if that kingdom were real, concrete, coming soon. For me, and I was not alone in this, the other disciples thought the same thing. That sounded like revolution, like the end of Roman occupation, like Israel finally becoming free. I saw myself in that. I wanted it. With everything I had, I wanted it to happen. But as time passed, I realized the kingdom Yeshua was talking about was not that. He was not planning a military uprising. He was not building a political resistance. He was talking about something else, about forgiveness, about loving enemies, about turning the other cheek. And inside me, that began to create a tension I did not know how to resolve. Because I kept asking myself, if it is not that, then what is it? And where are we going? Let me tell you about the week before everything happened. Yeshua entered Jerusalem riding a donkey. The crowd threw branches in the road, shouted Hosanna, treated him like a king arriving. And I thought, now it is going to happen. Now he is going to do something. Now this is going to become real. But that was not what happened. He went to the temple and overturned the tables of the money changers. He confronted the religious leaders. He taught in the temple courts. And the more he did this, the more I could see that the priests and the Pharisees were angry, were afraid, and were looking for a way to end him. And Yeshua knew that. He was not avoiding the confrontation. He was walking toward it deliberately. It was during that week that I went to find the priests. I need to tell you what was in my head at that moment. Not what people invented afterward, what I was actually thinking. I did not go for the money. The 30 pieces of silver, I did not even ask how much it would be. They offered and I accepted, but that was not what was driving me. 30 pieces of silver was the price of a slave. It was too small an amount for someone who had been managing the finances of an entire group for 3 years. What was driving me was something else. A mixture of things that is still difficult to put into words, but I will try. Part of me believed that if I forced the situation, if I put Yeshua directly in front of the authorities, he would be forced to act, to use the power I knew he had, to reveal himself once and for all, to do what I thought he should do. Another part of me was angry at having waited so long, angry at having believed in something that seemed to be falling apart in front of me, angry at myself for not knowing what to believe anymore. And one part of me, the hardest part to admit, was afraid. Afraid of what was going to happen if things continued the way they were going. The religious leaders wanted Yeshua dead. The Romans were nervous about the unrest in Jerusalem. And I was in the middle of all of it, responsible for a group of men, not knowing what was coming. So I went, and I did what I did. Let me tell you about the Last Supper. The Last Supper was the hardest night of my life, and I need you to understand why. We were all gathered, Yeshua, the 12, in a room in Jerusalem. Simple food, wine, the Passover meal. And during that meal, Yeshua took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and said, "This is my body, broken for you." And then he took the cup and said, "This is my blood, poured out for many." And I knew that he knew what was coming. It was not a metaphor. He was saying goodbye. And then he looked at me, directly at me, and said, "What you are going to do quickly." That look I will carry forever. It was not anger, it was not hatred, it was not contempt, it was grief. A grief so deep and so calm that it was worse than any anger. Because anger would have been easier to bear. Anger would have said I was an enemy. That look said I was still loved, that he knew what I was about to do, and that he was going to let it happen anyway. I got up from the table and walked out, and as I left, I heard the other disciples asking each other who could possibly do such a thing. They did not know it was me. Let me tell you about the garden. The Garden of Gethsemane was outside Jerusalem, at the foot of the Mount of Olives. Yeshua went there often to pray. I knew that. That is why I brought the guards there. The arrangement was simple. I would approach him and greet him with a kiss, the normal greeting between friends in that culture. That would indicate to the guards who should be arrested. I arrived at the garden with the soldiers and the officers of the priests. There were torches, lanterns, weapons, a large armed group coming through the darkness of the night. And Yeshua was there, waiting, as if he knew exactly what was about to happen. I approached him and said, "Rabbi," and I kissed him. And he looked at me and said, "Friend, why have you come?" Friend. He called me friend. In the moment I was handing him over, in the moment the guards were closing in to arrest him, he called me friend. That word destroyed me more than any accusation ever could. Peter tried to react. He drew a sword and cut off the ear of one of the high priest's servants, and Yeshua told him to put the sword away, and healed the ear of the man who had come to arrest him. He healed the man who had come to arrest him. I saw that. I saw it with my own eyes. And it was in that moment that I understood, truly understood, that I had made the greatest mistake of my life. Subscribe to the channel. Every week a biblical figure tells you the version history kept hidden. Let me tell you what happened after. When I saw that they had condemned Yeshua to death, something in me broke completely. It was not a gradual process. It was immediate. Like when you are holding something fragile, and it slips from your hands and you see the exact moment it hits the ground and shatters. That is how it was. I went back to the priests with the 30 pieces of silver. I threw them into the temple and said, "I have sinned, for I have betrayed innocent blood." And they said, "What is that to us? That is your problem." What is that to us? I had been used. That became clear in that moment in a way that left no room for doubt. For them, I was an instrument, a means, a tool that had served their purpose and could now be discarded. The guilt I felt, the weight I carried, the remorse that consumed me, none of that mattered to them. It was my problem, and it was. I went out and hanged myself. I need to say that plainly because it is part of the story. It was not an accident. It was not something that happened to me. It was a choice I made at the lowest point I had ever reached. A choice I made because the weight of what I had done seemed in that moment greater than any possibility of continuing to live. Now let me tell you what I would do differently, because that is what matters for you. The first thing I would do differently, I would have talked to him. That sounds too simple, but it is the truth. In 3 years walking with Yeshua, with all the doubts that were growing inside me, with all the tension I felt between what I expected from him and what he was actually doing, I never went to talk to him directly about it. I kept everything inside. I let it accumulate. Let the doubt become resentment, the resentment become anger, the anger become a decision made on a desperate night. If I had gone to him and said, "Yeshua, I do not understand where this is going. I believed in one thing and I am seeing another. Help me understand," maybe everything would have been different. But I did not go, because I had pride, because I thought I should appear to know what I was doing, because admitting doubt seemed like weakness. And that decision to keep everything inside, to not speak, to not ask, that was the decision that opened the door to everything that followed. If you are carrying something heavy today, a doubt, a resentment, a hurt with someone you love or respect, go and talk. Do not let it accumulate. Silence does not resolve. Silence ferments. The second thing I would do differently, I would not have let money sit at the center. I said it was not about the money. And that is true. It was not primarily. But the money was there. The 30 pieces of silver existed. And the fact that I accepted without even questioning says something about where I was at that moment. When you are confused, when you are angry, when you are afraid, money feels like an anchor. It feels concrete. It feels real in a moment when everything else feels uncertain. And that is exactly the moment when money is most dangerous, because it gives you the feeling that you are doing something, that you are in control, when in reality you are just selling yourself for an illusion of control. I did that. I traded what mattered most, loyalty, trust, relationship, for something I threw on the temple floor 3 days later because it was worth nothing anymore. Every time you are in crisis and someone shows up with a solution involving money, look carefully, because it is probably not a solution. It is a purchase, and you will discover what was sold long after the transaction has been made. The third thing I would do differently, I would not have tried to force what was not meant to be forced. This is the hardest one to explain, but it is perhaps the most important. I wanted Yeshua to be a specific thing. I wanted him to behave in a specific way. I wanted his project to have a specific outcome. And when it became clear that things were not going that way, instead of accepting that and rethinking what I believed, I tried to force the situation toward the result I wanted. I thought I could control the outcome. That if I put the pieces in the right place, things would go the way I wanted. They did not. They never do. There is an enormous difference between doing your part and trying to control the result. Doing your part is your responsibility. Controlling the result is not. And when you start crossing that line, when you start manipulating, forcing, trying to make fate obey your agenda, you are no longer acting with integrity. You are acting with fear disguised as initiative. Learn from my mistake. Do your part. Do it well. And then let go. The outcome is not yours to control. The fourth thing I would do differently, I would not have walked away from that supper without turning back. When I got up from the table and walked out, that was the moment. That was the moment when I could still have turned around, when I could still have stopped, gone back, sat down again and said, "No, I cannot do this." But I did not go back. I kept walking. And every step I took toward the garden was a step that became harder to undo. That is how big mistakes work. They rarely happen in a single dramatic moment. They happen in a series of smaller moments, each of which seems recoverable, but which together build a momentum that becomes harder and harder to stop. What I needed to do was stop at the first moment, or the second, or the third. But at some point before the garden, before the kiss, before the point of no return. If you are on a path that deep down you know is wrong, stop now. Not tomorrow, not after you finish what you started. now, because every step further will make the next one harder not to take. The fifth thing I would do differently. I would have sought forgiveness instead of despair. This is the one that hurts most to say, because when I threw the coins in the temple and heard, "That is your problem," I accepted that response as the final verdict, as if those men had the authority to say whether I deserved forgiveness or not. But they did not. They were the last people who should have had that authority. The same men who had just condemned an innocent man to death, who had used me as a tool and discarded me without a second look. I should have gone to the right place, to the only place where the forgiveness I needed was available. Peter denied him 3 times and came back. Thomas doubted and came back. They all ran on the night of the arrest and came back. Why did I think my mistake was the only one that could not be forgiven? It was not. I know that now. But I did not know it then. And the inability to believe I could be forgiven was, in the end, what destroyed me. When you do something wrong, and you will because every human being does, do not go to the wrong places looking for the verdict. Do not go to those you hurt expecting immediate absolution. Do not go to those who benefited from your mistake expecting compassion. Go to the only place where forgiveness does not depend on what you did, and accept that it is real, even when you do not feel you deserve it, especially when you do not feel you deserve it. If you made it this far, subscribe to the channel and share this video. There are people who need to hear this and have not found this channel yet. Let me tell you one last thing. For 2,000 years, my name has been synonymous with betrayal. Judas became an insult, a word people use when they want to say the worst possible thing about someone. And I understand that. What I did was real. The consequences were real. Yeshua died. That happened. And I had a part in it. But I want to ask you one thing before I finish. The next time you are judging someone, calling someone a traitor, writing someone off as beyond recovery, deciding that someone has gone too far to deserve compassion, remember me, not because I am an example of virtue, precisely the opposite. Remember me because I am what happens when doubt is never spoken, when resentment is never addressed, when fear becomes a decision, when a mistake becomes despair, and when despair finds no place to become forgiveness. I was not a monster. I was a man who made bad decisions in a sequence that got out of control, who had doubts he never expressed, who had fears he never admitted, who wanted to control what was not his to control, and who, when everything collapsed, did not know how to find his way back. This is not a story about evil. It is a story about what happens when human beings do not take care of what is growing inside them. Take care of what is growing inside you. Do not let doubt become resentment. Do not let resentment become anger. Do not let anger become a decision made in the dark. Speak. Ask. Admit that you are lost. Turn back before the momentum carries you too far. And if you have already gone too far, if you have already done what you thought had no forgiveness, know that the last thing Yeshua said to me before I left that supper was to call me friend. In the moment I was betraying him, he called me friend. That is the kind of forgiveness that was available to me, and that I refused because I did not believe I deserved it. Do not make that mistake too. My name is Judas, and what you do with that is the most important decision you will make today.